Egypt is the rare destination where the timing question has a clear, broadly correct answer. Come between October and April, avoid the summer. This is one of the more straightforward pieces of travel advice available for any major destination, and it's right. The Egyptian summer, particularly in the south, in Luxor and Aswan, and the stretch of the Nile that contains the greatest concentration of ancient monuments outside Cairo, is not merely uncomfortable. It is, by the standard of most human bodies acclimatized to temperate climates, genuinely prohibitive. Temperatures in the Upper Nile Valley regularly reach 45 degrees Celsius in July, sometimes approaching 50. Standing in the Valley of the Kings in August, in direct sun at noon, is a medical proposition rather than a sightseeing one. The advice to avoid the Egyptian summer is not overly cautious. It is correct, and it applies more absolutely here than it does to almost any other warm weather destination in the world. So the answer is October to April. Come then, not in summer. This much is simple. What is not simple, and what almost no timing guide explains adequately, is what happens inside that window. Because October to April in Egypt is not a uniform season. It is 7 months containing at least 3 meaningfully different conditions, and the gap between them matters enough that a trip built around the wrong sub-window can arrive correctly timed for the country in general and incorrectly timed for the specific Egypt you came to see. The division runs along a geographic line that Egypt's 2 main tourism circuits straddle, and understanding it requires separating those 2 circuits before putting them back together. Egypt has, roughly speaking, 2 tourist Egypts. The first is the Nile Corridor, Cairo, Luxor, Aswan, the monuments, the ancient civilization, the reason most people think of Egypt when they close their eyes. The second is the Red Sea coast, Sharm el-Sheikh, Hurghada, Dahab, the reefs, the diving, the beach resorts that receive a different traveler for a different purpose. Both are within the October to April window. They are not equally good at the same moments within it, and the traveler who tries to combine them without understanding the difference frequently ends up with one segment that feels right and one that feels slightly off in ways they can't entirely explain. Start with the Nile Corridor, because this is the Egypt most visitors come for and where the internal timing matters most. The Upper Nile Valley, Luxor and Aswan and everything between and beyond them experiences genuine winter. January in Luxor averages around 22 degrees Celsius during the day, which sounds pleasant by international standards, and the days are indeed mild and walkable and bright. But the nights drop to around 8 degrees, sometimes lower, and the temperatures swing between a sunny afternoon at the Karnak Temple and a felucca ride on the Nile at 9 in the evening is dramatic enough to catch visitors who packed for an African warmth that the Luxor winter doesn't consistently provide. February is similar. Warm enough in the afternoon, cold in the evenings and mornings in a way that requires a proper jacket rather than the light layers most people associate with Egyptian travel. This isn't a reason to avoid the Nile Corridor in winter. December through February remains the most popular period specifically because the European and North American markets have their school holidays and their own cold weather motivation to seek warmth, and Luxor and Aswan in December are legitimately wonderful. The daytime conditions for monument visiting are close to ideal. The light in winter is lower and warmer than the harsh overhead light of summer and spring, and the Nile is at its most atmospheric in the cooler months. But the night temperatures surprise people who didn't know to expect them, and the traveler who packs accordingly has a better trip than the one who arrives expecting unbroken heat. The more important timing insight for the Nile Corridor is the shoulders on either side of the winter peak, specifically October-November and March-April, and specifically why these months are underused by international tourists relative to what they offer. October and November sit at the opening of the season, after the summer has broken but before the European winter sun travelers arrive in volume. The temperatures in Luxor in October average around 33 to 35 degrees during the day. Warm, active, sightseeing requiring early starts weather rather than the extreme heat of summer, with evenings that are genuinely pleasant rather than cold. The crowds at the major sites are thinner than December and January. The Nile feluccas are running. The Valley of the Kings and the Karnak Temple complex, which in peak season process significant daily visitor numbers, are accessible in a way that feels less industrial and more like an actual encounter with antiquity. For the traveler whose primary purpose is the ancient monuments, who wants the experience of the Valley of the Kings without managing large tour groups at every corridor junction, October is one of the better months in the Egyptian calendar and one of the least used by the market that would most benefit from it. March and April mirror this dynamic at the other end of the window. By March, the winter peak is past, the European school holiday crowds have gone home, and the temperatures are rising from their winter lows back toward the warmth that the monuments deserve as a backdrop. A Karnak sunrise in late March, when the temperature is around 28 degrees and the tour buses haven't yet multiplied to high season density, is the Luxor experience that the photographs were taken to capture and that the December crowds make harder to access. April pushes the temperature higher. Luxor in April averages 35 to 38 degrees, approaching the threshold where midday sightseeing begins to be managed rather than simply enjoyed. But the mornings and evenings remain excellent, and the month still sits clearly on the right side of the summer prohibition. The shoulder months also interact better with the Ramadan calendar than the peak winter months in many years, and this is worth understanding as a layer on top of the seasonal logic. As in Morocco, Ramadan in Egypt follows the lunar calendar and shifts approximately 11 days earlier each year, meaning that different years place it differently within the October to April window. In years when Ramadan falls in winter, as it has in recent and coming years, it arrives during the peak tourist season and changes the operating rhythm of the country. Restaurant hours shift to accommodate the fast. The mood of Egyptian cities transforms in the evenings after iftar in ways that are genuinely extraordinary for the visitor paying attention, and certain logistical aspects of the trip require adjustment. In years when Ramadan falls in spring or autumn, it overlaps with the shoulder seasons instead of the peak, and the combination of Ramadan atmosphere and lower tourist density produces a particular version of Egypt that is worth understanding as a distinct travel experience rather than a complication to be avoided. Now, the Red Sea coast, because its timing logic is different from the Nile's in ways that directly affect how to think about a trip that combines both. The Red Sea's appeal is diving, snorkeling, and beach resort life, and the water temperatures that make those activities pleasant vary seasonally in ways that don't align perfectly with the Nile Corridor's best windows. The Red Sea reaches its highest water temperatures, around 28 to 30 degrees, in the late summer and early autumn, which places the warmest diving water in September and October, right at the opening of the acceptable tourist window. By December and January, when the Nile Corridor is at its tourist peak, the Red Sea has cooled to around 22 to 24 degrees, comfortable for diving with a wetsuit, but not the warm water experience that beach resort visitors typically imagine. This creates the specific internal asymmetry within the October to April window that makes combining the two circuits tricky. The best months for Red Sea water activities, September through November, overlap with the transition into the Nile Corridor season, but come before the peak. The best months for the Nile Corridor monuments, October through November and March through April, are good for diving but not the warmest diving available. The peak winter months of December through February are when European resort seekers fill the Red Sea hotels for sun and warmth, but the water temperature in those months is the coolest of the window, and the Nile Corridor is simultaneously at its coldest nights and its most crowded days. The practical implication for a trip that wants to do both is sequencing rather than simultaneous optimization. A trip in October or November that starts with the Nile Corridor in its shoulder season sweet spot and then moves to the Red Sea while the water is still warm catches both at reasonable windows. A trip in April that moves from Luxor in the warmth of late spring to the Red Sea for warmer than winter diving does similar work at the other end. The trips that don't work as well are the ones that try to do the Red Sea in the heart of winter, expecting the warm water experience alongside the peak Nile Corridor in its coldest nights, getting two things in two suboptimal versions of themselves rather than one thing at its best. There's a specific window that combines the maximum number of favorable conditions in a single trip, and it's worth naming directly: the last 2 weeks of October into the first week of November. At this moment, the Luxor temperatures are warm and active but not brutal. The crowds at the monuments are in shoulder mode. The Red Sea water temperature is still in the upper 20s. The Nile evenings are warm rather than cold, and the summer prohibition is safely behind the calendar, while the European peak hasn't yet arrived. It's not a secret that Egyptian tourism operators don't know about. The prices are not dramatically lower than December, but it's a window that significantly more travelers should be choosing and significantly fewer are. The secondary sweet spot is March, specifically for the Nile Corridor. The monuments are coming out of peak season, the temperatures are climbing toward their ideal active warmth, and the evenings no longer require the jacket that January demanded. For a traveler whose schedule gives them a choice between December and March for the same Luxor itinerary, March is generally the better call for the monument experience itself, even though December is when the travel industry points most visitors. Summer, May through September, is worth naming directly one more time because the advice to avoid it is occasionally hedged in ways that create the impression of more flexibility than exists. Cairo in summer is hot and manageable for people acclimatized to heat, and the Egyptian Museum is air-conditioned. The Red Sea in summer is genuinely warm for diving and beach life, and some resorts offer lower prices in the peak heat. But the Upper Nile, Luxor, Aswan, Abu Simbel, the Valley of the Kings in July is not a question of personal heat tolerance. 45 to 50 degrees Celsius is a physiological challenge that acclimatization mitigates only partially, that limits serious monument visiting to the first 2 hours after dawn and the last hour before sunset, and that makes the overall experience of one of the world's great travel routes significantly worse than any other time of year offers. The summer prohibition for the Nile Corridor is not an overcaution. It's the single most clear-cut timing rule of any destination in this catalog, and the only honest version of the advice is to follow it without qualification. October to April. Lean toward the shoulders if you can. Sequence the Nile and the Red Sea rather than trying to optimize both simultaneously. Check where Ramadan falls in your year and decide how you want to engage with it. And in the likely event that your schedule forces you into the December-January peak, pack for cold evenings and book the Valley of the Kings entry as early as possible in the morning. The monuments will be worth it in any of these windows. The question is just which version of the experience you get around them, and that question, answered correctly before you book, is the whole of what timing advice is for. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, smash that like button and subscribe to When to Travel. We're all about helping you make smarter travel decisions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And hey, if you think your friends need this, share it. Comment below with your next destination or your biggest travel question. I'm reading all of them. Let's go.